I met Professor Sue Black at South by Southwest in 2023. We were on a rooftop with a hedge fund manager, people from NASA, and some of the biggest and most influential names in tech. Yet when she started telling her story, everyone grew quiet because it was that amazing.
And I got to interview Sue at this year's South by Southwest Festival.
And Sue's story is so impressive because of everything she's faced, as well as everything that she's accomplished.
She dropped out of high school and had children young, then had to flee from life-threatening abuse.
And since that point, not only has she become determined and gone back to school and gotten her PhD, but I want to read some of her accomplishments. She's become one of Forbes' top 50 women in tech, the professor of computer science and technology evangelist at Durham University in the UK. She set up the UK's first online network for women, BCS Women. She now runs Tech Up Women, helping women access tech and tech careers in the UK, and she's working with the UN on digital skills for underserved communities. She's also the Order of the British Empire, essentially the female equivalent of a knight, so she received royal treatment and royal acknowledgement for everything that she's done.
And that's not even all. Sue led an online social media campaign to save Bletchley Park. That's where Alan Turing and thousands of women whose stories are almost entirely unknown worked to crack codes during World War II.
And then she wrote a book about it. So this is the woman whose story you want to know. Sue, thank you for joining us today. We just want to start at the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and where you grew up and how you grew up?
Sure. Hi, thanks very much for inviting me. It's lovely to be here. I grew up in the UK. I come from a family where both my parents were nurses, so we weren't rich, we weren't poor. Brother and sister who were twins and 5 years younger than me. And my life was just kind of like, pretty average, I think, until I was 12. And then unfortunately my mum died really suddenly. So I think she went to bed with a headache on the Saturday, and by Tuesday we had to switch off the life support machine.
Oh, wow.
She'd slipped into a coma, and then we found out afterwards she'd had a brain hemorrhage. So of course that was a massive shock. Then, my dad then, about a year later, got married to the person that became my stepmother. And unfortunately, that seemed great to start with, but then quite soon that wasn't so great. There was a lot of sort of emotional bullying, a bit of physical violence, and I think the worst things were actually just stuff like being. I was the oldest of then. There was me, my brother and sister, and 3 stepbrothers, and I was the oldest. And I think what was hardest for me was that I kind of got singled out as the oldest and had some quite bad treatment, just in terms of things like not having enough food to eat. We had a washing machine, but I had to wash my clothes in like a bucket in the garage, hand wash them, and then when I went to put them on, like my school uniform on a Monday morning, particularly in the winter, my clothes weren't dry, so I'd have to put on like damp or quite wet clothes and wear them to school in the sort of freezing cold, and lots of things like that, which just made me feel, I don't know, not great at all. I think I just got really depressed. That's like from the age of about 13 to 16 for 3 years, really. It just kind of got a bit worse and a bit worse and a bit worse. And I felt very, very lonely. I didn't really relate properly to anyone at school because none of my friends were going through the same sort of thing. And I just used to think, like, why is this happening to me? Like, what did I ever do to kind of have such an awful life? I really wasn't happy at all. And when I was about 16, I was just 16, in the school holidays, like the summer holidays, I left home and moved in with my friend's family to just kind of escape because I was so unhappy. And I just used to sit in my bedroom in the evenings and just think, how am I ever going to get out of this situation, I suppose.
Is that the point at which you dropped out of school?
Almost. So I moved in with my friend's family. So I worked as a waitress at a cafe down the road from when I was 14. Just to make a bit of pocket money, which I actually spent on food because I didn't get enough at home. One day I was walking to the cafe on a Saturday morning and bumped into my friend Kate walking down the road. We were both going to work, and something bad must have happened that morning, I think, because I was upset. And so I said to her, "Look, I've got to leave home. I can't take it anymore." And she said, "Well, my mum takes in lodgers. Why don't I see if you can come and live with me and my family?" And so she asked her mum that night, and the next weekend I took my stuff and moved in with Kate and shared a bedroom with her and lived in her family house. And her family weren't well off, so I needed to work more hours so that I could pay some rent to Kate's mum. And I went to a school which was 25 miles away, so I kind of carried on at 16 after taking my O-levels. They were then, not sure what it is in the States, but like whatever you do at age 16. So I did that and passed that, just passed. And then wanted to carry on to do kind of up to 18 education because I wanted to go to university. But so I was going 25 miles to school, so I had to get up early, go to school, come back, and then go straight to the cafe. Then I'd work in the cafe in the evenings and the weekend. And by the time I got home in the evening from working in the cafe, it's probably about 10:30 at night, and then I'd have something to eat and think about doing my homework. And so, kind of over a few weeks and months, then I didn't do my homework. I'd be falling asleep at school, and I just realised at some point I'm not going to pass my exam, so there's actually no point in me staying on at school. I just have to think about that later on. And so I got a job working for the local council, and then I was able to pay my rent and kind of like put off education until sometime later on. I didn't know when that was going to be.
And at some point you got into a relationship and then ended up being a very young mother.
Yeah.
So that added another layer of responsibility
Sure.
and stress. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So I worked for a few months with the council. It was filing, and I like putting things in alphabetical order, and I just used to joke always that I could have done that job when I was 4 because I could read and I knew my alphabet when I was 4, but I wouldn't have been tall enough to put all the files in order because it's kind of back in the day before we had computers really at work. And it was all kind of like cardboard files, putting those in alphabetical order. So, after a few months there, I was like, what am I doing here? I mean, I was there to get the money, but that was it. So then I thought I need to get another job. So I spent a year working with refugees for a year. So I really enjoyed that, like running a creche for the refugees when they went to school, and we looked after the kids. And then I tried nursing. I didn't really know what career I wanted. And so many people in my family are nurses. So I thought, let me try nursing. So I did that. Did the first year of nursing, but I was just such a useless nurse. I was really, really shy. And like when you're a nurse, you have to talk to patients. And for some reason, I hadn't really thought about that part of it before I did it. So I was just really shy. I didn't know what to say to the patients that were coming in, and I was just hopeless. And one time, you'd have your list of things that you had to do kind of written on a bit of paper when you started in the morning. And I would start doing one thing and think, oh no, I've got to do something else, and get distracted. And one time, I turned the taps on for a bath to run a bath and then completely forgot about it, flooded the whole ward. And I think it was after that I just thought, what am I doing here? I'm never going to be a good nurse, so what else can I do? And then I kind of thought back to when I was at school, my favourite subject was math. So I thought, why don't I try and do some job that involves math? And so went along to the local job centre where they had jobs advertised, and there was one working in the accounts department of a record company. So I thought, well, I love music, I love going out to gigs and stuff, and I love maths as well. So this sounds like the ideal job for me. So I applied for that and got there. I got that job, and that was great. So I don't know if you know, Sweet Dreams by Eurythmics. Yeah, so I was at the one of the recordings for the video for that in this sort of famous nightclub in London. So I did lots of really cool things and doing maths all day at work. So I was there for 2 years, and then my boyfriend then proposed to me when I was 20, and we got married, and then I had my first daughter when I was 21. And I thought, well, I'll have another baby and then I'll go back to work after that. And so then I got pregnant again, but then that was twin boys. So then I had twin boys when my daughter was 2. So at that time I was 23. And that was all fine. I mean, it was hard work, obviously, 3 small children under 2.5. But then about a year after that, my ex-husband became violent, and we had to run away one morning. Early one morning when he threatened to kill all of us. And I know it's crazy, but he threatened to kill me before, but I'd never really taken it seriously. But as soon as he said he was going to kill the kids, that was it. I just thought, we've got to go. I just can't risk that happening. So kind of packed our bags and ran out of the apartment that we lived in, ran down the road over to my friend's house and phoned up Women's Aid, Women's Refuge service. And they said they were going to ring me back. So I was waiting for them to ring me back, and the phone rang, so I picked it up, and it was my ex-husband saying he was coming over. He knew where I was, and he was coming over to kill me. So then we had to run down the road again to another friend's house, phoned back again. Then they gave me an address right on the other side of London, and I didn't have any money. My friend gave me like £20 to get a cab, and then we got a cab to the other side of London. And that night we were in a women's refuge and stayed there for 6 months.
So at that moment, I mean, fleeing for your lives,
Yeah.
homeless, penniless, did you feel any sense of hope for the future?
I think the day that I was running away, it was all about just get out of here and find somewhere safe. And I remember the next morning, that they'd given me some money to go out and get food for the kids and like nappies, diapers and stuff, because they were still small. And the next morning I went out, and I can remember walking along and pushing the twins in the double buggy and my little daughter, who was like 3 by then, and down to a supermarket, walking around the supermarket, buying some stuff and kind of coming out and thinking, like, this is the start of the rest of my life. You know, I kind of suddenly, I think actually I was sick. I was like physically sick, like on the road. And then it was like, no, this is my new life. Like, we're okay. Like, we survived what happened yesterday. And yeah, I don't know. I think I did. I felt very optimistic at that point that I'd managed to get out of that situation.
Did you have a sense of what you were going to do from that point, or how were you thinking about it in that moment? You were just going to do whatever you needed to do?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, because I just didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what happened in a women's refuge, what it was going to be like. I had no clue. So, you know, like we had, each family had a room. I think there were about 6 families in a big house. And yeah, I mean, it was much easier than living at home with a husband who was throwing stuff around and, you know, trying to strangle me and stuff like that. So actually it seemed great to me, you know, but yeah, I mean, it was fine. I quite enjoyed living there, made some friends that I've still got to this day, some of them. And so we were there for 6 months, and then I managed to get an apartment not that far away, so still kind of the other side of London, and managed to get it decorated and stuff, and sort of moved in, and, you know, didn't have much money at all, but by then I'd made some friends, and, you know, like people helped with sort of like secondhand furniture and stuff like that. And then I thought, okay, I need to get the kids into school or something. So by then my daughter was 4, and I managed to get her a place at the local primary school for her to go to school, because we start school at 4 in the UK. And then got the boys into playgroup, so they had like 2 hours of childcare a day. So kind of got them sorted with that. And then I thought, okay, well, what am I going to do now? I need to get a job, right? I need to earn some money. And I looked at the sort of jobs that I'd be able to do, because I'd been out of work for a few years and didn't have many qualifications. So I looked at what jobs I could do, and that would be like administration, like in an office somewhere, or working in a supermarket on the checkout, something like that, or stacking shelves. When I looked at how much I'd earn, I realised that it wouldn't be enough to even pay for childcare for the kids, so I couldn't actually go back to work. So I thought, okay, well, I didn't want to leave school. When I did leave school, why don't I try and go back into education? So I went along to the local college, and luckily they had a maths course, which was the equivalent of 2 A-levels in maths, which is what you need to get into university. So like in a year, if I studied hard, I'd be able to apply for university. So that I did that course, and it was 2 evenings a week and then 20 hours a week private study at home, which I did. And the first time I walked into the classroom, I was horrified, because, you know, like I was a single parent just come out of a refuge, like with not much money. And there were all these people, you know, quite a few guys in suits, and kind of like, I just was like, oh my God, what have I done? But actually made some really great friends there, and had a wonderful time. Actually, it was really great. And my friend and I, my friend Lorna, who was also quite kind of underconfident going into that class, we both came joint top of the class at the end of the year. So that kind of really boosted my, you know, my sort of self-esteem, I suppose, at the time. Applied for university, got a place at the local university, and went there and started a degree in computer science.
You talked about the process of kind of rebuilding your life and the gratitude that you were actually free and that you were alive. Was there anyone at that point who was really pivotal in your life, or really pivotal in you becoming kind of the person you were, or beginning to see who you could become?
That's a good question. I think, I mean, the thing is, I had to drop lots of my friends because I was worried that my ex-husband would be able to find me. So that puts you in quite a difficult position. So yeah, I can't actually think of anybody particularly at that time. I mean, I think I was just kind of just pushing myself forward, wanting to create a better life. And I think particularly having children actually helped me, because I just thought I was doing it for them. And somehow that's easier than, I don't know why, somehow that thought was easier than doing it for myself. I was doing it for my kids. I didn't want them to have a life where we had no money and I could never take them on holiday or couldn't buy shoes for them and that kind of thing. So I was really, really driven, I think, particularly by that idea that I've got to provide for my children, and I want them to have a nice life. You know, I want them to have the things that we all want for, you know, for our kids. So yeah, I can't think, maybe there was, and I've forgotten now because it's so long ago. But you know, I think the friends that I made at college and then at uni were really supportive. My teacher, Willie Taylor at the college, he was really supportive. You know, so there are probably different people kind of along the way that just supported me and helped me to feel confident that I was doing the right thing. But I mean, I did feel totally driven that I've just got to create a better life for my children.
So you said you were always good at math.
Well, but not. I wasn't outstanding. I was just like, I loved it for some reason. I don't even know why. It just makes my brain tingle.
So, and that was early. You remembered that from early on in your education.
Yeah.
So, at what point did you start to go towards computer science?
Right. Okay. So the course that I did at college was mainly maths, but with some computing. So we did some programming in one of the terms, and I didn't quite understand what I was doing, but I just liked it. And I think I had to choose really between a maths degree and a computer science degree. And I just thought back then, technology is the future, right? So I just want to go into computer science. And I really was focused on, I must earn as much money as possible to support my kids. So it was really all about the money. I think, you know, I like both subjects at the beginning. And, you know, I now know if I'd got a maths degree, it wouldn't matter. I'd still, you know, it wouldn't make any difference really in terms of salary. But back then I thought, like, you know, all the high paying jobs are in computing. So that's what I'm going to study.
So you've been called a trailblazer for women in tech. Did you have any role models or anyone you looked up to as you were walking this path?
No, I don't think so. Again, because like I get asked about role models quite often in technology, and I didn't know any women in tech at all then, you know, and I just didn't, there weren't any, you know, and I think most of the role models in computing back then were all guys that we knew of. So yeah, no, I didn't really have any. I mean, I know there's the first British person in space, Helen Sharman. So I kind of knew about her, and she'd kind of been a chemist and then, you know, like applied to be an astronaut and got in. But that's the only person that I can think of. I can't think of any women in computing back then that I actually knew about.
Wow.
Were there other women in your classes as you progressed through?
We were about 10%. So like my class in the first year, I think there were 83 students and eight women.
Did you feel like the environment was welcoming to women, or did you experience any resistance to being a woman going into this field?
So I think to start with, like when I was a first year student, everything was so new. I didn't even think about anything like that at that time. I don't think. It just was, well, that's how it is. So I didn't think about it at all. And it wasn't really until, so I did my degree, and then in the final year of my degree, my dissertation supervisor asked me if I was interested in doing a PhD. And I said, oh, I'd love to do a PhD. I didn't know what a PhD was. I was just, you know, like styling it out. I didn't know what it was. I knew it was something academic and good, but yeah, I didn't really know what it was. And so he encouraged me to apply for PhD positions, which were funded, which was good. And yeah, after that meeting, I went to the library and looked up what is a PhD and found out, and I thought, okay, yeah, actually, maybe I would like to do it. So applied for that. And it was only really when I became a PhD student, then started going to academic computer science conferences. And yeah, I think I hadn't noticed that I was a woman sort of in the 10% women. But going to conferences, and then again, I was still quite shy, even though by then I was like early 30s. I was shy of speaking to people I didn't know. And my supervisor, my PhD supervisor, said to me, when you go to conferences, you've got to network. Like, you've got to kind of get out there, meet people, so that when you send in your research papers and they see them, kind of like come across their desk, they think, oh yeah, Sue Black, I know her. Like, we had a chat about research, at this conference. So I thought, okay, I've got to like just get out there and talk to people. Horrific as though that seemed at the time. And the first conference I went to, there was a guy who kind of like seemed very down to earth. He gave a great talk that was quite funny. So I thought, well, I'm going to go and chat to him in the break. Hopefully he'll be okay. And I can have a conversation with him. And he was reasonably well known. So in the tea break, I went over, started talking to him, told him about my research, and had a good chat with him for like 10 minutes. I thought, wow, I did it. I talked to someone that I don't know for 10 minutes. But then for the rest of the conference, every time I turned around, he was staring at me. And I just got totally freaked out. Like, did I say something that offended him? Like, why is this man staring at me? I don't know. And I think probably now thinking back, he probably thought, oh, that young lady, like, maybe she likes me or something. I don't know what he was thinking. But, like, I wouldn't even notice if someone was staring at me out of the crowd. But then I was just like hypersensitive to anything. And so I got very freaked out by that. And I had other experiences at computer science conferences where it was probably about 10% women, and sometimes it was absolutely fine, but I didn't think about the fact that most of the people there were guys. So I was mainly talking to guys, and I didn't even think about that. But then, I had some not so great experiences. Like another time I went up to two guys standing there, we're sort of encouraged to go and talk to people at conferences again. And I said something like, oh, what did you think of the last session or something? Like a sort of standard how to talk to people you don't know at a conference. And they both stared at me and then looked at each other and started talking to each other and completely ignored me. So I just stood there thinking, what do I do now? I don't know what to do. So I could just kind of like stood there for like, I don't know, 20 seconds. And then I just thought, this is horrific. I just walked off, went to the loo, sat in a cubicle and started crying because I just thought, what am I doing wrong? Like, I just couldn't understand it. And now I just think, well, they're assholes, but like when you're not very confident, I thought I'd done something wrong. And so that was kind of like some of those situations which made me realize I'm a woman in computer science or a woman in tech, there is something going on here. But I still thought partly that it was on me, that I didn't know how to talk to people. I was doing the wrong thing. And then I went to a conference which was for women in science. And I walked into that conference thinking, okay, I've got to network. I'm not very good at networking. What am I going to say? How's it going to go this time? And I went in and got my badge and went over and got a cup of coffee and was standing on one of those standing tables. And, a couple of other women came over and we started chatting. And for the whole 2 days of the conference, I didn't have to think about networking because it just felt like everyone is talking to everyone the whole time. So it was just such a completely different environment that I'd never been in before. And I just thought, well, this is incredible. It really did change my life. And I made friends there, again, that are still friends to this day. And when I came back from that conference, which was in Brussels, I came back to the UK and I thought, there must be other women like me that feel the same way at conferences. So why don't I see if those women are out there, and why don't we set up a network so that we can all connect with each other, chat to each other, maybe meet up at conferences and that kind of thing. And so that's how I ended up setting up the UK's first online network for women in tech, BCS Women. So it's British Computer Society Women's Network, back in 1998. It was like 26 years ago now. I can't believe it's that long.
And so that was a network. And so, late 1990s, women could connect. Did that sort of have a place at conferences you went to? Like, how would that bring women together? How did it work? It
was like an online network. Back then it was like through email, basically. It was like an email group. And so people could arrange to meet each other, but we were all kind of connected through the network. So people would ask each other questions like, oh, I've got this interview. Can anyone help me with, I don't know, this programming language? Or what should I wear to an interview? Or is anyone going to this conference? That kind of thing. It was mainly about connecting people together. But then I managed to get some funding to run some free training on how to set up your own website. So that back in 98 as well, which was very early days for that kind of thing. And then, the group grew and it's still going today with over 1,000 members.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So you talked about your kids really being the driving force because
Yeah.
you want to be able to provide for them or, just give them the life that you'd want them to
Yeah.
have. And you talked about these barriers and the discrimination you faced or the kind of just like obstinance you faced.
Yeah.
Did you have an end goal in mind? Do you have any idea where you were going or what you were going to do?
No, I was going to earn enough money to make sure my kids were okay. It was all about the money to start with. But I mean, I did enjoy it. And I thought, like computing was my best shot. And I did enjoy computing. So like when I was doing my first degree, we basically lived in poverty. No, we didn't have enough money to live on. And in fact, before that, we were on benefits, so like on welfare, but I actually had more money on welfare than as a student. So that was really tough for 4 years. But then when I got the PhD position, my income trebled then. So it still wasn't much compared to most people. But to me, it meant that I could, I didn't have to worry, can I buy food? We had days when we would just have like mashed potato and an egg for dinner because that's all the money I had. So then, when I got the PhD position, I didn't have to worry about that anymore, which was great. It was a great relief. And I think each time I've just been kind of focused on what's the next thing. How do I make things better? What's the next kind of like jump forward from where I am now? But it's not like I thought I must be a professor of computer science. Yeah, that came at some point. But like back then, I would have no clue that I'd be doing what I'm doing now at all.
So you talked about BCS and women in tech. What was the next step in you kind of giving back? Because a big part of your story now is about how you kind of clawed up with no people to look up to, no necessarily help or no mentors, but you wanted to make sure that other people had that opportunity. So what was the next step you took to really give back to other people?
Well, I think so because I'd set up the BCS Women network, I got invited up to Bletchley Park, which is where the codebreakers worked during the Second World War in the UK. And that's all I knew about it the first time I went there. And it's like this 26-acre site north of London. And because I was head of this network, I got invited up to this meeting there in 2003. And I went to the meeting and then I went for a walk around the site. And it still is like a museum. But it was quite a rundown museum back then. And so I walked around and I went into one of the buildings there. And there were these guys that were kind of tinkering away with this sort of amazing feat of engineering that was kind of half built with like these cogs and wires and stuff. So I just started talking to them like, what is this thing you're building? And had a great chat with them. And they told me that they were rebuilding Alan Turing's bomb machine, which was the machine used to kind of like industrialize the code breaking process. So like cracking the codes rather than having to do it with pencil and paper. They could do it on a much larger scale. And it made like a major difference in winning Second World War. And so, I started chatting to them about that. And then they said, well, what are you doing here? So I said, I'm here representing this group of women in technology, in computing. And the guy I was chatting to, John, said, well, did you know that more than half the people that worked at Bletchley Park were women? So I said, no, I didn't know any women worked here because I hadn't seen anything like in everything that I'd seen on the site up till then. So I said, no, I didn't know that. How many people worked here? And he said more than 10,000. So I was completely blown away because I thought it was probably 50 old blokes. I don't know why. So I was completely amazed that, and it turns out it was about 8,000 women worked at Bletchley Park during the war. And, everyone that worked there didn't tell a soul, what they'd done. Oh. And I found out after that, that so many of them were, young women like 18, 20, and had gone there, had to sign the Official Secrets Act, sort of being threatened by a soldier with a gun, apparently, some of them, that they were never allowed to talk about what they'd done there and stuff like that. So it was a really interesting story. So I went away that time and thought, I've got to do something to raise the profile of the women that worked at Bletchley Park because 8,000 women worked there and we don't even know that at all. So then I got some funding to run an oral history project, so to capture the memories of the women that worked there, them telling their stories. And then at the launch of that, which was in 2008, I gave a talk about the project, and then the guy that was the director of Bletchley Park at the time, his talk was all about basically we're running out of funding, Bletchley Park might have to close, and if we close, we'll never be able to open again because once the site, kind of that scale, 26 acres is shut down, like how on earth are they going to get the money to open it up or the people? So I thought, well, that's terrible. It shouldn't close. Like all these amazing things happened there. And then a few weeks after that, I was invited up to a reception at Bletchley Park and I got to do a full tour of the site with one of the people that worked there. So one of the codebreakers took us around, and he was telling us about all these major code-breaking achievements and all the different places that they happened. Some of them by, I think one of the codebreakers was a 16-year-old guy and like an 18-year-old woman. So like teenagers, which, that story's still not properly out there, really, like even now. And then at the end of this tour, he said, and the work that was done here was said to have shortened World War II by 2 years. And at that time, 11 million people a year were dying. So he said potentially the work that was done here saved 22 million lives. And I just thought, this place can't close. I've got to do something about it. So by that time, so kind of like going back to my career, so I did my degree, then I did a PhD. And then in the middle of my PhD, I applied for a full-time lectureship at the university. So I got that. So then I became a lecturer or professor, and then applied for promotion a few times. And by this time in 2008, I was head of department. So I was head of a computer science department at another university, University of Westminster. And because I was then head of department, I was on an email list for all the heads and professors of computing in the UK. So I emailed all of them, said, we've got to save Bletchley Park, asked for their support. We wrote a letter to the Times, which is one of the things you do in the UK to kind of raise awareness of issues. And so that was signed by 98 scientists, and managed to get us on like BBC News and on the Radio 4, BBC Radio 4 Today programme in the morning, which is like one of the main news programmes in the UK. So, and kind of like really raised awareness of the plight of Bletchley Park. And so it kind of like, the story went everywhere, and it was amazing. But actually then a few weeks later, nothing had actually happened. Like the story had got out there, but like there was no money or anything coming into Bletchley Park to save them. And after a few months, towards the end of 2008, I ended up being at a conference where the guy on stage said, "Who here's on Twitter?" So I went, "Oh, I'm on Twitter." And I said to the guy sitting next to me, "It's rubbish, isn't it?" And he said, "No, it's great. Like, you can do this, that, and the other." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know all of that." So then I started using Twitter to help with the campaign, what became the campaign to save Bletchley Park, and got various people involved in that, like Stephen Fry. So I don't know if you know Stephen Fry well in the US, but in the UK he's a national treasure. And at that time he was the person in the UK with the most followers on Twitter. So got him involved, which was great, and basically campaigned for 3 years to save Bletchley Park. And in the end, so that was 2008 to 2011. And yeah, in 2011, they said, okay, Bletchley Park is saved. We've got 4.1 million from the Heritage Lottery Fund in the UK. So we know we're going to be okay.
That's amazing. Amazing. So, that really changed and you have a book, Saving Bletchley Park, that you wrote that was a bestseller on Amazon in the UK. Yeah. And I know you can get it. You can get it here as well. So that I think that story is remarkable, and it shows sort of this perseverance. Do you think that quality, or what quality do you think you have that keeps putting you in these situations, Sue?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm a resilient person, and I think the challenges that I've had to overcome have helped me to not be too scared of things that have happened afterwards. So, like my mum dying just completely messed up my whole life in lots of ways. And I think because I sat in my bedroom just for hour after hour, day after day, feeling unhappy and just kind of stuck where I was and unable to do anything, I think that kind of helped me, helped set me up, even though it was horrible at the time, helped set me up, because I worked out, well, what's important in life. And to me, it was to kind of help make the world a better place, I suppose. And I particularly care about people that haven't had the best chances in life, because that's where I was, and I know that you can get through it. And so I think that's partly it. And I think, like in the case of Bletchley Park, I was just so angry. Like, why was no one doing anything about it? And I just thought, well, if no one else is doing anything about it, I've got to do it. And I think I've just ended up, that's kind of become part of what I do. But, like, you don't kind of realise at the time that that's actually what's going on. But it's kind of, it is a pattern that repeats itself. And the older you get, the more you realise that is a pattern sort of in your behaviour.
What, and you talk about resilience and managing or juggling things. This all happened when, after 20 years of single motherhood and, advancing your career, you had some very big shifts in your personal life. You had another daughter?
Yeah. So I had another daughter, Leah, when I was 41. And so that was amazing. My other kids were 20 and 18 at the time. But yeah, so she's been just a blessing, really. She's just so wonderful. She's just such a joy to have around. So that's been great, really.
And did you feel like, oh, I have to do this all over again? Or were you just like, oh, I've done this before. I know how to do this. I can be a parent and add all these things. Did you just feel more confident because you had done it successfully with your other?
Yeah, I think totally. Because the other three, I'd kind of brought up a bit under duress when they were little and with other stuff going on, like in the home situation. So like being my fourth child, that was fine. I just wasn't worried about anything because I just felt like, I'd had twins as well, like when I had a 2-year-old. And so that's such hard work. I mean, again, I enjoyed all of it, but at the same time, then having one child was just like, yeah, okay, just enough. I mean, what's it like when you have, like, one of my friends is one of 13? Like,
wow.
What's that like for her mum having so many children? I just can't imagine that many, but yeah.
In thinking about the women and finding out that it was women who had, who had worked at Bletchley Park.
Yeah.
And then also your experience sort of with your own discomfort in those conferences and sort of finding a way. What motivates you and what do you think are some of the goals that you have in the future for helping women to enter tech?
Yeah. So I think after the Bletchley Park campaign finished, I think I must just have a campaigning or sort of problem solving personality, I guess. And so after that was finished, I was kind of like thinking, well, so what's my next, what's my next thing? What am I going to do next? And at that time, so it's about, it's 2011, 2012, I was getting really fed up with the way that technology was quite often, or nearly always, seen, or particularly in the media, kind of portrayed as a very negative thing. And of course, there's negative sides, but also there's amazing positive sides too. And kind of getting annoyed that the positive side wasn't in there in the media. It was all about, like the robots are going to kill us and take away our jobs kind of stuff all the time. And also there wasn't really any computing or technology taught in schools, not much until kids were 14. So before 14 in the UK at that time as well. And so I thought, well, that's ridiculous. Like kids can do stuff with tech from when they're 2, or, like as soon as they can swipe on an iPad or something. And so, why don't we help them to see the beneficial stuff at least, so that they can then become kind of tech savvy, and then they can be the entrepreneurs and create great tech products which will help people in the future, having grown up with it. And at that time, the government minister in the UK for education said that computing is too difficult for anyone under 14. And I just thought, that is just such a load of rubbish. I thought I need to do something to prove that that's wrong, because I know it is kind of like intuitively. So I started running workshops for 7-year-old kids in schools, and bringing in stuff like app design and coding in Scratch and using Raspberry Pis and coding, and found that the kids absolutely loved it and they could all do it, and they were 7 years old. And then at the end of the day, we would get the parents to come in and I'd say, okay, like mums and dads, have a look at what your kids have been doing and maybe have a go yourself. And I noticed that when I said that, in general, the dads would just kind of like step in and like, yeah, so what have you been doing? Some of the mums were like, oh, yeah, don't, like I could just see that look on their faces that they weren't so confident to do that. And it just kind of sparked a thought in my head, why don't I try and put together a program to teach mums tech skills? Because if we get mums on board, there'll be a positive influence on their kids. It'll be great for women in technology. We'll get more women going into jobs in tech and stuff. So I put together a program and called it Tech Mums, particularly focused on women in areas of disadvantage in the UK, and just started running the program in schools and libraries around the UK. And that was quite successful. We always struggled for funding, but we managed to change quite a lot of women's lives running that program. And then more recently, we've run a program from Durham University called Tech Up Women, which is a program. So kind of like through my career now, which is a few decades, I've met so many women that want to work in tech but don't know how to get into tech, because like if you look online, there's just so much stuff like of what to do. How do you work out which is the best thing for you? And then at the same time, I've talked to so many like senior people in tech companies saying we want to hire more women, we want to hire more people from diverse backgrounds. How do we do that? We advertise but not enough women apply or whatever. So I've just heard that over and over. So I thought, well, why don't we create a program which takes women from underserved communities through a program that is co-designed with industry. So people working in the tech industry tell us which jobs they want us to train women into. And then with them, we work out what kind of content they want in there. And then we create a program to teach them the basics of tech or computer science through to specific job roles. And so that's a program we've run 5, 6, 7 times now over the last 5 years, targeting different sort of demographic groups of women. So at the moment, we're focused on 18 to 30-year-old women with a program that takes them into IT support kind of role. The first time we ran the program, the industry partners we had then wanted us to train women into being software engineers or data scientists, agile project managers or business analysts. So we created a program to retrain into that. And we've had, over the 5 years, I think 350 roughly women have gone through the program and then gone on either to further education, other courses, or gone on to working in technology. And some of them are kind of like senior in tech now and winning awards and stuff. So it's just, it's wonderful. It's just such a joy to be part of that program and to see the women going through it. And in fact, some of the tech mums that came on like the sort of basics program that I was talking about earlier, have then gone on to do the Tech Up Women program and then gone on to jobs in tech. And so they've gone from being scared of technology through one program, then on to another program, and now working in technology. So it's just so amazing to see women kind of go through that journey and kind of like realize their potential. And it doesn't just affect them, it affects everyone around them as well. So like when we were trying to find content for our like sort of promo video, I guess, to promote the course, we talked to one of the women on the program. Then her son was there with her, and he said, "Can I tell you like what a difference it's made to my mum and how she is, but also to our whole family and stuff." So I don't know. It's just I just love it.
That sounds like I wanted to hear. Is there a moment, or there's probably many moments, where you have really felt proud of the impact your work is having, or really just thought, "Wow, I did that." And that sounds like one of those moments. Are there any
absolutely.
others where you have just sort of felt like, I can't believe how far I've come or what I've done?
Yeah, well, I think that every day, to be honest. I still can't really believe that I'm doing what I'm doing. I carry on doing it, but inside I'm like, wow. I just never would have had any clue earlier on that I'd be doing what I'm doing at all. Like a few years ago, I was like on the Forbes top 50 women in tech globally, and I was just like, how did that happen? I mean, I know how it happened, I guess, but it's just, it's just beyond all dreams of anything. I just basically was going one step at a time towards the next thing, and doing things that I felt very passionate about, I suppose, kind of on the side, really. And all of that together has kind of created this person, which is now me. So, yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, so going back to like being really proud. So we have a graduation like for all of our Tech Up Women that go through the program when they finish. And, like every time we have graduation, I'm there. And my co-founder, Alexandra, who's a professor as well at the same university, is there. And we have our team that run the program, but we're kind of like there, congratulating everybody, giving out the certificates. And so last year, one of the graduations, I think Alexandra had COVID and I was ill, so neither of us could go, like the founders of the program. And so our team had to run it without us. And I just got the videos of that the other day and watched it. And it's amazing because like we don't even have to be there now. And the program runs and it's got all the kind of, we really focus on kind of fun and building confidence, and everyone kind of like living their best life, and I don't know, just trying to really generate this excitement and confidence about who they are and what they're going to be doing. And it worked even without us there, and so that made me very, very proud.
And, you've done such an amazing job of highlighting the women who've accomplished these things in the programs, and you seem to choose to highlight their stories rather than your own. But what would you want people to take from your story and the things you've struggled with, or the obstacles you've faced, and kind of where you've gotten to? Like, what is the takeaway from your story?
I think that you just have to keep going. I think a lot of the time, I've been utterly despondent many times in my life, and I suppose I kind of wish that I knew that if I kept on going, I would get somewhere, almost anywhere away from, the situations I was stuck in. And I really think that if you just go step by step. So when times are difficult, don't put too much pressure on yourself, but at the same time, just try and keep going to, if you're in difficult times, to get back out to the good times again. You just have to keep moving forward, even if it's tiny, tiny steps forward. So that's one thing. I think another thing I think which has helped me over the years is to not listen to the people that are very negative in my life, and to focus on surrounding myself with people that are positive and encouraging. Because like back in the early days, I just got so much negativity, and it just drains all your energy. I think it's very, very hard in a negative environment to be able to do the things to kind of reach your potential, because everything is kind of shutting you down. You want people around that kind of help you sort of blossom into who you can be. And I think also trust your gut instincts. I think you know yourself better than anyone else in the world. And so if you think something is wrong, then most likely it is wrong. If you think something is right for you, then most likely it is right for you.
Great. Anything we haven't asked you that you want to make sure people hear?
Just keep believing that you can get somewhere, because you can get out of very difficult situations, and it might take a really long time, but just, surround yourself with people that will support you to get to where you want to go, I think.
All right. Sue, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, you're so welcome.